from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And if you haven't heard, a couple hours ago, Steve Scalise, who yesterday was the official nominee of the Republican Party to serve as Speaker of the House, has dropped out of the race for Speaker of the House. And this is an interesting development. And I'll tell you, it was interesting how I'm having some work done in my house, in the bathroom. And the guy, who's a friend of mine, who's doing the work for me, he tells me, he's like, you know, your guy Trump, the guy's no good. Anything he endorses falls apart, this, that, and the third. And he's like, you know, Steve Scalise seems to be like a decent guy. You should be happy that they've agreed on him. And I said, look, I don't know that he has all of the votes. We have to see when this goes to vote if it's going to work out. And just a few short hours later, that was probably around 6 p.m., around 8 p.m., we hear that Representative Scalise has withdrawn his name from the House Speaker's race. And, of course, this comes on the heels of many members, as you heard Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne last night explaining her frustration that there was an agreement. We thought we had an agreement. We thought we were moving forward because they need to move forward on a number of issues. And I can say, again, when these things happen, I'm always of two minds. I can't sit here and say, stop playing games, get your work done, because while part of me feels that way, the other part of me says, you know what? This is our Republican action. This is people doing what they've got to do. And I would love it if it were a little cleaner and neater and more timely, not in the middle of this big fight that we're having over funding, the big fight that they're having in the Middle East, and so many things that are happening where we really need to be more unified than ever. But at the same time, we need the right person, and Scalise is apparently no longer interested. The vote that he won yesterday was 113 to 99. Many of the members of Congress had issues with the decision that Jim Jordan was not going to be the favorite, and a lot of them wanted him to stay in the race. So I'm not sure how much of that is a factor in this. I'm pretty sure it's a whole lot of it. Tom Emmer, who's the current minority whip, he also has reportedly expressed interest in running for Speaker as well. And I believe Trump's endorsement remains with Congressman Jim Jordan. So we have an audio clip of Congressman Steve Scalise making that announcement. Check this out.
I just share with my colleagues that I'm withdrawing my name as a candidate for the Speaker designee. If you look at over the last few weeks, if you look at where our conference is, there's still work to be done. Our conference still has to come together and is not there. There are still some people that have their own agendas, and I was very clear. We have to have everybody put their agendas on the side and focus on what this country needs. This country is counting on us to come back together. This House of Representatives needs a speaker, and we need to open up the House again. But clearly, not everybody is there.
Now, Scalise is explaining his rationale for doing that. And again, my thinking is that there is enough of a political will to not go against Scalise, but more so for Jordan. This is just my speculation. This is what I felt. And I think maybe I'm right. Who knows? We'll see as this plays out. But it seems to me that there will be galvanized support around Jordan now that Scalise is out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's naive of me to say. Maybe this becomes very contentious and bitter. I don't think so. I really do think that they're going to get around Jordan. I think this was just a move to solidify around Jordan. But in so much as that's going on, this is the rest of what Scalise had to say.
I never came here for a title. I've had some great titles. I'm the majority leader of the House, and I love the job I have. I've had big challenges in my life. I've been tested in ways that really put perspective on life. Really, the 2017 shooting, when I didn't know if I was going to make it out alive, taught me what's important in life, and that's my family, my faith, and I'm blessed beyond belief. I have absolutely all the right perspective, and I still have a deep, deep passion for making sure we get our country back on track and get our conference fixed again.
I think so many of us that are listening to Representative Scalise agree with him that we want to see this conference as strong and as united as possible. And, of course, it's politics, and there's always going to be a give and take. And my hope is that people will do what politicians do and cut whatever deals they have to make to get to the next step in this process where we can have a speaker. I'm hopeful that it'll be Congressman Jim Jordan from Ohio. We'll have to see how that plays out. But there are a number of people out there that are pushing for Jordan. Congressman Tom Massey has been vocal in his support for Jordan. And he also put out a poll on his Twitter account where this is where I'm supposed to say formerly known as X, asking his constituents who they would prefer. And Jim Jordan was the favorite according to that. And this is according to the Post-Millennial at around 8 p.m. Now, Jordan said on yesterday, that he would offer the nomination to Scalise on the floor of the House, but things are changing so rapidly now that Scalise isn't even seeking the nomination for Speaker anymore. So don't know exactly how it's going to go, but we will keep you posted on this every step of the way. Now, that's that. Now, other issues that, continue to go unaddressed because of so much of the newness of the news cycle with things breaking at night and whatnot. We still have this report that came out a day ago, 2 days ago. The Biden administration has let 99% of illegal immigrants stay in the U.S. since taking power in 2021. And this is according to a report released by House Republicans on Monday. The report found, again, I mentioned this last night, but worthy of repeating, 2,148,738 illegal aliens had been released into the United States by the Department of Homeland Security from the time that Joe Biden came into office until March 31st of this year. Absolute insanity. The border's wide open. We're seeing what happens when you lose control, kind of what's going on in Gaza. I would hate to see a nightmare scenario like that unfold here, and I think the Biden administration is really dragging their feet or willfully complicit in something like that happening here because things are moving fast, really, really fast, and it doesn't look great. Anyway, some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, I want to talk about some of the parallels between the attacks of 9/11, 2012, the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi, Libya, and the war that's going on in Gaza. And we're going to do that in a little bit with one of the stars of the movie 13 Hour. He was one of the real people from the movie. Oz is going to be with us. His real name, Mark Geist. And he was a member of the Annex security team that fought in the Battle of Benghazi. We're going to talk about that and about his new book as well. We're also going to talk with Frank Gaffney a little bit after that. He's scheduled to join us. We're going to talk about what's going on in Israel with the Israeli Defense Forces now having launched 6,000 bombs on Gaza. And the death tolls, again, remain staggering, absolutely staggering. And, of course, an update on what's going on with parents and children across the country as the left continues to try and make their move on your children. These are our children. We have to say hands off, so we're going to get into that. Plus your calls and more on Open Phone America. And the phone number for that, again, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDES if you want to chime in on any of these topics while we have our guests on. And, of course, the third and final hour of the program is reserved for you, the listeners, to call in and sound off. So keep it locked right here. Get really comfortable. We've got a lot to discuss, a lot of amazing guests tonight, and I'm looking forward to an amazing show with you all. I am Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I say to you, I say to all of us, there will be many difficult days ahead. But I have no doubt that the forces of civilization will win. And the reason that's true is because we understand what is the first prerequisite of victory. It's what you just said in our meeting. Moral clarity. This is a time, a particular time, a special time, that we must stand tall, proud, and united against evil. Tony, you are taking that stand. America is taking that stand. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, America, for standing with Israel today, tomorrow, and always.
That is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at a news conference today with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in Israel, and making the resounding call that this is a time we must stand united against evil. I agree with that. And when he says there's difficult times ahead and that we have to stand against evil, I couldn't agree with him anymore. I think Netanyahu's right on the money with that. And, of course, evil rears its head in many ways and has at many times in our history. And I can't help but think of the parallels that we see with both this surprise attack on Israel as well as the surprise attack that happened back on 9/11 of 2012 with the attack on the embassy in Benghazi, Libya. And, you know, we look at that and we had hearings about it and hearings upon hearings upon hearings. And at the end of the day, all I can think of is, you know, you have to be prepared, and you have to, you know, just really, I guess, think like the enemy, because when you least expect it, it seems to be when they always seem to strike. And one of the members of the Annex security team that fought in this Battle of Benghazi way back when was Mark Geist. You know him as Oz if you've seen the movie 13 Hours. And Mark Geist has a new book. It's 13 Hours, the inside account of what really happened in Benghazi. And Mark Geist is with us. Oz, welcome to the program, sir.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You bet. So, I mean, you heard the comments right now from Prime Minister Netanyahu saying we have to stand up to evil. How do you react to that?
Well, we do. I mean, you know, you see it across the world. I mean, in the United States, we're seeing, you know, that demonic presence is what it seems like that is coming. You know, that it's if there's God, there's a devil, and the devil is trying to take over. We know that he can't win this, but this is what we're seeing in the Middle East: is the Sunni tribes of Hamas and Hezbollah, backed by Iran, are trying to take out, you know, follow their path. And what they've always said is they want to destroy Israel. And, you know, they're trying to destroy the peace accords that President Trump had put in place between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and the UAE and Israel, which are a separate tribe. That's the Shia tribe, or the Sunni tribe there. And the Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran are Shia. And, you know, they fight against each other as well. And we need to make sure that we don't let them interfere with the peace that we have in the Middle East, as you know, that was set forth by President Donald Trump.
Of course, and of course you're referring to the Abraham Accords, which I think always goes underreported and is definitely being undone as we speak. Now, based on your experience, would you say that this was an intelligence failure, maybe people being too comfortable in their security, or can you just never really predict evil?
Well, you know, you're right. In one sense, you can never predict it. You just have to be prepared for it, and that's one thing with Israel. From my experience of being around them and the people I know from there, is they are always prepared, because they are at the footstep. You know, they are at the palisades of evil. They're standing on that wall, and but at the same time, it's, you know, I call it my 6 P's: prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And if you're not ready, whether it be in Israel or very well could happen here, you know, we've had open borders for the last 2.5 years of the president of the Biden administration, and we have no idea what's been coming across those borders. And I can bet money that there are bad guys, there are terrorists, there's evil people who wish to do us harm in the ways that we're seeing in Israel right now. And if we don't, we're not careful, we will get attacked again.
That's scary stuff. And the other night I shared with a former general who was on the program that, you know, for years I've had family members of mine telling me, listen, we're going to get attacked from within. There are people pouring across the border. And I was always very skeptical of this, saying, look, I know there's a lot of people coming in, and I don't want them to come in, and we should shut the border down, and we should lock it down, and we need border security. But a bunch of women and children and guys that are barely 5 feet tall aren't going to be the death of America. However, that seems to have changed in the videos that I'm seeing of people coming across the border now. I'm seeing, you know, 100, 150 guys that are Asian. I don't know if they're from China or where, but they're coming in. You're seeing, you know, hundreds of men, young men, all young, physically fit men that are coming in from Northern Africa and other places that it isn't these guys that are barely 5 feet tall and women and children anymore. There seems to be a real mix. Plus, we have all these gotaways that we can't quite put our finger on. How eminent do you think a threat is at this point regarding our national security?
Well, I think it's very probable that something's going to happen soon. You know, it's going to take the right people that are making that that are looking for that. You know, they're going to look at soft targets, and they're going to look at when we are most distracted. And you know, with the way that the left and the right have been going at each other for the last, I don't know, I'd say probably 8 to 10 years. You know, we're a two-party government, and our worst fear is that we become a two-party government and our people's loyalty is to the party before it is to the country. And that's what we got to turn around is we need to turn around and get away from this hating each other and loving this country. When we see, you know, kids are being taught to hate this country and that it isn't the great country that it is. We haven't changed. You know, they're not being taught the changes that we've made over the last 100, 150 years with the Industrial Revolution and all the good things that come of it. And, you know, by no means is this country a saint, but if we don't teach our kids to love it, they're not going to serve in the military. We're seeing recruiting problems as we speak. Mm-hmm. And it's because the quality of young men and women that we're raising this day and age is not the same as it was when I was a young man.
Well, I want to get into that, the constant problem that we have to recruit people, and I want to learn more about your book as well and get your thoughts on a couple of other topics. Folks, we're on with Mark Geist. You know him as Oz, if you've seen the movie 13 Hours, and he's got a brand new book, 13 Hours, the inside account of what really happened in Benghazi. We're going to hear about that story as well when we come back. So don't move a muscle. Keep it locked right here. If you want to join the conversation, our phone number is 482-337-8334 Valdez. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with Mark Geist. You know him as Oz. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We're having a really good conversation with Mark Geist. You know him as Oz from the movie 13 Hours. He's the real-life member of the Annex security team that fought in the embassy in Benghazi, Libya. His brand new book, 13 Hours, the inside account of what really happened in Benghazi. And we left off with discussing the recruitment problem that our military faces because we're raising children that hate America, because of the education establishment, because of so many things that have been popularized in culture, where it's almost cool and the thing to do to not love your country and to support every one of our enemies as if they're the good guys and we're the bad guys. And that's definitely part of the problem. But I think another part of the problem is the lack of understanding, the lack of awareness of something that Mark mentioned earlier, which was how much this country has achieved historically, from fixing social ills to the Industrial Revolution and the industriousness overall of our nation. And Mark Geist, I wanted to, kind of just put a pin in all of that to get your take on what do you think it takes for us to move forward?
Excuse me. I think it takes the right leadership. We need some leadership that is not beholden to the special interests, who loves the Constitution, who is going to stand up for what it is, and not just be a puppet that's telling everybody the right thing. We need the right leadership put back in place, and somebody who loves this country. And I think that's what it's going to take. And it's going to take each and every man and woman across this country that still understands that, we were given this great nation, and the rights that we have are given to us by God, not by man. And it is that is what truly matters. I mean, we've taken Christ out of our schools, out of our families, out of our churches in some cases, definitely out of our government and our military, and that's where you need it most. I mean,
Amen.
We're sending young men and women off to see and do some of the most horrific things that you can do to another person. And if you're not right with the Lord, you're going to struggle with that evil that has to be done, because it's the only way to get through it is with your relationship with Christ.
Amen, brother. I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about the book and about your story. As part of the, I think so many of us have seen the film, heard the book. Some of your colleagues have also given interviews on this, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it, because I think it's just an interesting look at history, where you guys were serving as contractors, providing security. Is that right?
Yeah, we were. Our team was 6 people: myself, Tonto, Tig, Jack, DB, and Roan. And the 6 of us were private military contractors for the Central Intelligence Agency, better known as the Culinary Institute of America. But that's what we were doing there. And we had a consulate that was about a mile away from us as a crow's fly. And, they were sitting on about 8 acres, and they had 5 diplomatic security officers to protect that 8 acres, which was completely inadequate. There's times to give up that you sacrifice security for safety because you want to be more low key, but you're not going to hide 8 acres of a U.S. consulate. And unfortunately, the administration at the time didn't pay attention to those on the ground, didn't listen to what they had to say, and left them in a very precarious situation when they got attacked that evening of September 11th, 2012.
So as they got attacked, and again, I know that was misrepresented by many in the media as, it's just a YouTube video, it's just this, it's just that, and whatever, what have you. But they're under a real attack, and Chris Stevens was his name, I believe. He was murdered.
Yeah, Ambassador Stevens, yep.
And this becomes a huge ordeal, an attack on America. How do you guys fit in?
Well, we were, like I said, we were at another compound about a mile away. And, we knew that the guys, because we had talked with them, we'd seen their security and what they had, and that, if they got attacked, it was not going to be good. And the moment, pretty much the moment they said that they were under attack, and it really actually wasn't they were under attack. They had been had been taken over by 40 armed individuals. And they got taken over. They did what they were trained to do as security, doing what their protocols were at the time. And because of that, though, that's why they got overran so easy. And we weren't going to let that happen. I was on my way back from a meeting with a case officer when the rest of the team made their way over there. And, two went up on some elevated positions to be able to see inside the compound, also provide cover fire while the other three, Jack, Tig, and Roan, went down the main street, come up in through the front of the consulate, and a lot of people always ask me, how does three people take over 8 acres, a compound that's occupied by 40 armed individuals? And, it's through the element of surprise and the sheer exercise of violence, extreme violence. And, when they came through that front gate and they started putting people down, it was a surprise to them because they didn't expect it. And they literally overwhelmed them, killed a bunch of them, and pushed them out of the consulate within a very short period of time, and able to then try to secure everything. And they started searching for the ambassador and Sean Smith.
Now, the title of your book is 13 Hours, and many have seen the film. But walk us through why your book is called 13 Hours, the inside account of what really happened in Benghazi.
Well, the story was being told by the media and by the administration at the time of what it wasn't. They did a media campaign on the morning of the 12th and the 13th and just blasted it for the next couple weeks about what it was. And and I think both sides handled it all very, very unprofessional. But, once they did that, we as a group, the 5 remaining team members of the security team in Benghazi decided that, we need to make sure that this story gets told as we lived it. People can disagree with it. They don't have to say this and that, but I can tell you the book and the representation of the movie was as good as you can get when it comes to describing what was there and how we lived through it and what we did. And it was from our eyes and ears and what we did, the surviving members, and we were able to put it together in a wonderful book called 13 Hours.
Outstanding. Folks, we're on with Mark Geist. He's a member of the real Annex security team, CIA contractors that fought in the Battle of Benghazi back in 2012, and looking at using that as a base point for analysis of what's going on across the world today. And we're going to continue that discussion straight ahead. If you want to join the conversation, feel free. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
They just said, we found Emily. She's dead. And I went, yes! I went, yes, and smiled. Because that is the best news of the possibilities that I knew. That was the best possibility that I was hoping for.
That is the voice of Thomas Hand. He is the father of Emily, who we just referenced, who was discovered dead at the hands of Hamas in the murderous war that was waged against Israel over the weekend and continues today. And our guest, Mark Geist, you know him as Oz from the film 13 Hours. He's the real-life hero from that movie. He was a real-life member of the Annex security team working as a CIA contractor in Benghazi, Libya, at the time of that attack. And I can't help but see the parallels between the two. And Mark Geist, when you hear Thomas Hand talk about, you know, being grateful that he found out his daughter was dead, that she was murdered, when you're grateful that your own kid is not alive because of the rape and torture and what other possibilities exist, how does that make you feel? Like, what's your reaction to that?
You know, the first reaction when is the same thing I have when any child gets hurt, and that's just immediate rage and wanting to show them give them the same fear that they're putting in kids and women across the country or in this effect around the world. It's uncalled for. It's not necessary. And you know, it's, the Bible says, and I can't quote too much scripture, but you know, those who hurt our children, you have a greater chance of swimming with a millstone around your neck than getting into heaven, basically. So that's kind of, you go after our children. That becomes a very personal thing.
You know, Mark Geist, I wish many, or if not all, in our administration shared your passion to defend our country and defend children. It seems like with the death toll now up to 27 Americans confirmed murdered by Hamas and many more hostages, we seem to, in my opinion, I feel like we're not responding fast enough. Is that presumptuous of me, or is this the right thing to do?
No, I think you're not being presumptuous at all. I mean, you know, I got a phone call Sunday morning from an acquaintance whose sister was trapped in Bethlehem, along with 83 other church parishioners from their hometown in North Dakota, who had went on a tour to Israel and just happened to be there when the attack come. They had gotten a hold of the State Department, and the State Department told them, there's no emergency at this time. Just stay where you're at and we'll call you. And, you know, and it just didn't feel right to a lot of them. And my friend's sister reached out, and he reached out to me if we could help. And, you know, and I got to give, this is not glory to me, this is glory to Christ above, who, you know, who happened. I was able to get a hold of some people who I know who are in country, that live in, you know, that are Israeli and live in Israel. And through them, we're able to help these people end up making a decision, you know, and really the courage goes to the individuals that were there to make the decision once they had enough information on what kind of decision to make and what are the probabilities. And they were able to then make the decision to go to Jordan instead of trying to get back to an airport where that was being shut down. And they got, all of them got home this week.
Oh, wow. Amen.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. But not everybody has a Mark Geist that they can call, right? And not everybody has that ability. And I feel like it's incumbent upon the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, Joe Biden, who I call Joe El Baboso Biden, to really do the right thing here. And I feel like, I feel like, and again, I don't have any family in Israel, but I just think Americans are being sold out. And it just seems so wrong to me.
And it is, you know, it is from the very get-go, and the lies that are being perpetrated or being told, you know, when I think it's been, and I can't give the exact dates, but there's been 3 times in the history of Israel that they were going to make it a two-party, you know, not a two-party, but a
two-state solution.
A two-race. Yeah. And every time the Palestinians turned it down. They could have had their own state, ran it the way that they wanted, but they want the whole thing. And that's greed and hate and that evil that you were talking about, rearing its head to keep people fighting. You know, that's the easiest way to trying to separate two groups, get them to not like each other. If you can get them to not like each other, you can get them to hate each other. And if you get them to hate each other, they're going to be able to do, they can kill each other. And that's what we got to be looking at and remembering what this is truly about here on Earth.
Now, Mark Geist, who is the author of 13 Hours, the inside account of what really happened in Benghazi, I want you to let everybody listening know how they can get a copy of the book.
The best way, obviously you can order it on Amazon, but you'll either be getting a soft cover or maybe a used hardcover. But if you go to my website, markgeist.com, we have books for sale, hardback edition books, and they'll be autographed by myself, and that's the best place to get them.
All right, and that's markgeist.com. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Folks, check out markgeist.com. Get a copy of the book. Get 2 copies. Give one as a gift. Christmas is in like 5 minutes. It's almost November. 13 Hours, the inside account of what really happened in Benghazi. Mark Geist is the author. You know him as Oz from the movie 13 Hours, one of the real-life members of the security team that fought the Battle of Benghazi. Mark Geist, I could talk to you for hours. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Godspeed to you, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, you too. Thank you, and God bless you and yours.
Amen. Folks, we will continue with your calls, thoughts, and comments straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, to the phones we go. Let's go to Washington, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Let's check in with Dan. Dan, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yes, Rich. I've been going through this turmoil individually in my local community. I wanted to write a article for somebody that performed a Heimlich on somebody, and I was at a volunteer at a bridge festival we have in Pennsylvania. And I started to get entangled into how exclusionary we have to be to report just the facts, the truth, and not get people's names or whatever. And this all translates, I think, through filters, and we have to be cognizant of, like, our greatest filter is what we tell our children, so that they understand the good and the bad, and not take the bad as being complete evil, where they get on a tangent and, add to the problem.
Right. Well, Dan, I think what's important here is what you just said. It's important for us to explain things to our children in a way that they understand. And sometimes the only thing children can understand, depending on how old they are, is what evil really is. And I think this situation that we see happening in the Middle East, in Israel primarily, is an excellent example of pure evil. And I know for my children, I've been wanting to sit down with them. I probably won't see them until Saturday at the same time if I can. But to really explain, what's going on in Israel, why people are killing each other, because I'm sure they're bombarded with information and filters, like you said, from all over the place saying that Hamas are just an oppressed people. And while that may even be true, it's never okay to kill babies, women, and children, burn them, and behead them. Thanks for your call, Dan. I appreciate it. Folks, there's more to come straight ahead. Don't move a muscle. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And there's plenty to discuss and plenty of excellent experts to discuss it with. I want to go over the big news of the evening, 8 o'clock tonight, Eastern Time. Representative Steve Scalise announced that he is no longer in the race for Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. Listen to this.
I never came here for a title. I've had some great titles. I'm the majority leader of the House, and I love the job I have. I've had big challenges in my life. I've been tested in ways that really put perspective on life.
Now, Scalise, of course, referencing being shot by a Bernie Sanders supporter, and, of course, everything he's gone through as a member of the House of Representatives, pulling out of the race. And he has an ability to build coalitions and unite Republicans, but he struggled to gain support from members of the GOP conference. So after winning a secret ballot election last night to become Speaker designate, there are other people with other agendas, and there's seems to be a push behind Jim Jordan. So we're going to keep you up to speed on that as that continues to develop. Plus, Benjamin Netanyahu was in Israel today making statements along with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. And here's what Prime Minister Netanyahu said.
Hamas has shown itself to be an enemy of civilization. The massacring of young people in an outdoor music festival, the butchering of entire families, the murder of parents in front of their children and the murder of children in front of their parents, the burning of people alive, the beheadings, the kidnappings of a young boy, not only kidnapped, molested, hurt, attacked.
Of course, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu showing a lot of emotion here because this stuff is absolutely horrific. And his counterpart, Israeli President Isaac Herzog, was at a press conference as well, and trying to explain that they're doing things the right way. They're following the rule of law. But it seems that the left within the media, the left within our government, the left globally are coming at Israel saying that they're somehow the bad guys for responding to these types of attacks. And I want to get to the bottom of that with our guest, Frank Gaffney. He's the chairman and founder of the Center for Security Policy, centerforsecuritypolicy.org, and he's the author of The Indictment, Prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and Friends for Crimes Against America, China, and the World. Frank Gaffney, welcome back, sir.
It's great to be with you, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now, Frank Gaffney, I want to play a clip of audio. Actually, it's cut into two parts, but I want you to hear the back and forth between President Herzog of Israel and, let's see what her name is. Let's see, Becky Anderson of CNN. Listen to this.
We are operating militarily according to rules of international law, period, unequivocally. But we're at war. We are at war. We're at war we are defending our homes. We're protecting our homes. That's the truth. And then when a nation protects its home, it fights. And we will fight until we break their backbone.
Tough words from Isaac Herzog, Israeli president. And again, listen to this exchange as it continues with Becky Anderson of CNN.
Becky Anderson from CNN. The collective punishment of a civilian population amounts to a war crime under international law. The US has warned Israel to uphold laws of war.
But I just answered, Becky, you haven't heard probably their reply to ITV. And I'm quite disappointed that that's what you're asking instantaneously. Haven't you seen? You've seen. You're all there. You were all there. You've seen. So now we're starting with the rhetoric about war crimes. Really? Truly? Truly?
With respect,
what do you mean?
With respect,
truly? You see, I just said that Israel abides by international law, operates by international law. Every operation is secured and covered and reviewed legally. With all due respect, I truly believe that it comes totally out of context.
That's the exchange, Frank Gaffney. Do you feel that Israel is being maligned here somehow? Is CNN being responsible with their journalistic inquiry, or is this, part of a larger narrative to say that they're the bad guys, even though they're the victims?
I think, Rich, what you're getting a taste of is what will be the main line narrative in the days to come. CNN is just ahead of the pack in, launching this kind of attack on Israel. I thought you might also be talking about a clip that I think came out of that same exchange, if I'm not mistaken, in which President Herzog, who's not, a fire breather by certainly Israeli standards, took real umbrage at the fact that the gal, I think it was this one, was suggesting that Israel is in the wrong because it is attacking what appear to be civilian targets. And he said, look, if they've got a missile firing in the direction of my home from somebody's kitchen, we are entitled to take it out. So this kind of back and forth, I think, is to be expected. It has accompanied every single one of Israel's previous efforts to contend with Hamas and the threat that it poses. And again, as has been pointed out by, Secretary Blinken, I think today, and certainly by a host of others, including Israelis, there's a world of difference between people who deliberately target civilians for the purpose of killing them, especially in the most egregious ways, not least for propaganda purposes, on the one hand, and on the other, people who are trying to protect their people against such attacks. And because the enemy that is attacking them deliberately puts civilians in harm's way, and it's not just people's kitchens; it's hospitals, it's the kind of charitable organizations and other things that they will secret their weapons in and fire from, knowing full well that if there is a retaliatory action or a preemptive action, it will kill their own people. And then they will be able to turn this into precisely the kind of rhetorical attack that accompanies the more physical and violent ones. And I think we have to expect there will be more of those things, especially if Israel does what I think it absolutely has to do, which is to go into Gaza in force, root out the jihadis that have been engaged in this kind of warfare, and by the way, have brought upon their people this incredible hardship for the better part of 20 years now, and are holding hostages and so on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's a tough situation for those that are in Palestine that feel, they don't want to be a part of this, but I don't think they have a choice. This is kind of Hamas's MO and has been historically: hide in the mosques, hide in the hospitals, hide in schools. With that being said, we have our president, who I like to call Joe El Baboso Biden, and he's out there beating the drum. We stand with Israel, and he lit up the White House in the colors of the Israeli flag, and he said a lot of things. But I feel like there are 27 murdered Americans and many other hostages, and we've sent an aircraft carrier and some arms. But I feel like that doesn't go far enough. Is that me being hawkish, or maybe I'm being naive? What say you?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Rich. The Israelis don't want us to go further, I believe, at this point, certainly to engage our own military in operations with I think, the exception of some special forces that might be pulled in to try to find and rescue hostages. But they
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm thinking if it were my family there, I'd want to know that our best guys are out there trying to get them.
Well, and I think that's in a very limited way an exception to the general rule that they do not want foreign forces fighting their wars. They believe they can fight them themselves, and they understand too. And this is why I say I think there has to be some concern about doing otherwise, especially with an administration such as this, which until this attack, we should be clear, Rich, was very hostile to the government of Israel.
Right.
I would argue was doing a whole lot of things to undermine it, to actually encourage Israel's enemies to engage in these sorts of
giving $6 million in sanctions back to Iran?
Well, that would be one example of it. I think aligning itself and actually funding some of those in Israel who were talking openly about overthrowing the duly elected government of Benjamin Netanyahu, a civil war, even assassinating the prime minister and his cabinet. And these were not, the random extremists. These were leaders of the opposition that were saying that, and the Biden administration, this is in the context of a very, very significant fight over judicial reform, as you know.
Right.
But the reality is, until the attack, I think it was encouraging the Palestinians and the Iranians and the Chinese, by the way, who I believe are behind much of this, to think that there was a lot of daylight between the United States and Israel, and this sort of action could be undertaken with impunity.
Folks, we're on with Frank Gaffney. He's the executive chairman and founder of the Center for Security Policy, centerforsecuritypolicy.org. He's also the author of The Indictment, Prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and Friends for Crimes Against America, China, and the World. We're going to continue with him straight ahead, along with your questions and comments. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
John, what is the status of the $6 billion that Iran was set to have access to?
It's still sitting in the Qatari bank, all of it. Every dime of it.
Is there an agreement now to, in essence, withhold it from Iran should they come asking for it?
None of that money has been spent, and I have no updates to provide today.
All right, that's John Kirby. That was earlier today. Since then, this money has been frozen. Thank God somebody was thinking, finally. And all I could say is, that's part of the issue, but not the entire issue. I want to bring back our guest, Frank Gaffney. He's the founder and executive chairman of the Center for Security Policy. He's also written the book, The Indictment, Prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and Friends for Crimes Against America, China, and the World. Check that out at theindictmentbook.com. Frank Gaffney, you just heard John Kirby say, look, we put the money out there. We haven't released it yet. We now know that money is frozen. And I don't know that it necessarily is those particular dollars. There's plenty of other ways that Iran was able to make money by way of this administration being soft, in my opinion. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think the administration was simply under, irresistible pressure to stop the madness under these circumstances. But it's a good thing on a number of different levels. It means basically we've stuck it to the Iranians instead of paying a ransom of $6 billion for 5 people. To be sure, they did get 5 of their own people who had been, properly prosecuted for various criminal activity back. But if they don't get that money, that's a good thing. it seems to me. But to your point, Rich, and this is really the critical one, because the Biden administration has been assiduously trying to appease the mullahs, basically from the moment it took office, including through some very, very problematic machinations of a special envoy by the name of Rob Malley. We can talk a little bit more about.
He's the one that brought the Iranian spy in, right?
Well, I think possibly a number of them. There's one in particular by the name of Aryan Tabatabai, who is, I think, even as we speak, the chief of staff to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations Forces, which is an extremely sensitive position. And yes, there's reason to believe she is at the very least an agent of influence for these guys, if not something else. But this fellow, Rob Malley, lost his security clearances for other reasons, apparently compromising classified information with the Iranians. But he has also evidently been pushing into government positions, so-called Iran experts, who seem to be expert because they're working for the Iranian government. But anyway, my point is this, that the Biden administration has been determined to try to do anything it can to get some kind of new nuclear deal with the Iranians. And in the course of it, it has essentially stopped enforcing sanctions on the export of Iranian oil. And the Chinese Communist Party has been buying up just about all of it to the tune of something between $32 and $40 billion just in this year alone. And, you know, these guys are past masters at applying whatever money they have at being fungible, after all, even if it's given in the spirit of trying to help the humanitarian situation of the Iranian people, as Tony Blinken endlessly talks about. They're simply using it to offset funding that they're going to go spend on terrorism or on their nuclear weapons programs or their ballistic missile programs. And yes, they do say endlessly they want to bring death to Israel.
Frank
with all
Gaffney,
of those kinds of programs, but they also want to bring it to us.
Right. And you know, I just have to agree with you. I can't imagine any administration in the United States being friendly to a country that starts their parliamentary sessions with these chants of death to America, death to Israel. But here we are. And thankfully, I think for political purposes, they don't want to be the ones to say, we gave them $6 billion back in sanctions, and then they launched this massive offensive against Israel. But Frank Gaffney, I want to thank you. The music means they're kicking both of us out of here. But you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thanks for being with us.
Terrific to be with you. Thank you. Bye.
You bet. Folks, check them out at the Center for Security Policy.org and stick around. We're going to discuss what's going on with the attack on your kids straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
America, this is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And the battle over the culture continues. You've got people on Dr. Phil and other places. A while back, there was a bunch of people. He had a panel on Dr. Phil when that was still a show, where they were discussing the issue of gender identity, gender roles, and whatnot. And I want you to listen to this, just a bit of this exchange between an activist for the LGBTQ movement and a gentleman who was just trying to argue against her by using facts. Listen to this.
Men do not menstruate. Only women menstruate. Now, you can call yourself whatever you want.
Cis men don't menstruate, but trans men do menstruate.
No,
Same
they
as
don't.
non-binary people.
Only women.
Menstruating is not exclusive to cis women. No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
So explain to me as to why my body menstruated at some point.
If your chromosomes are XX and you're young, you menstruate. If you're XY, you don't.
Correct, but what about trans men and non-binary?
They're
We're
not
excluding
men.
a whole group of people
They're women
that
dressed
menstruate.
as men.
Well, what's a man to you? You define a man for me.
You have chromosomes that are X and Y. That's what a man is.
So why are we just looking at the science of this as an
The
example
science.
when we've learned sex and gender identity are they're completely different things?
They're not completely different
They are
things.
completely different.
Completely different words.
Sex is what you're born with, the sexual reproductive organs you have. Gender is what you identify with. They're completely
Well, I don't
different
accept that
things.
distinction. You have to argue for it. You're just giving a conclusion. You're just making it up.
Okay, of course, that's a fifth grade teacher, Eli Ehrlich, arguing on Dr. Phil against Dr. Yalda Safai, whether or not men can menstruate. And it's just fascinating to me that this is even a topic of discussion. But it is, and this continues to go on, and it's happening all over the place. I recently had a conversation with the mom of a 6-year-old, and she was saying, I got a notice, or I heard from one of the moms at school that they're going to be teaching about sexuality, and we have the right to opt out of that part of the class. And I'm thinking, what do you really think they're going to do with your kid? Put them in the cafeteria or the library or something like that? I don't believe for a second that they're not going to try and teach your kids, even if it's on the way in and on the way out. Like, why don't you want to learn about why men can be women or women can be men, little Susie? I mean, they're going to mess them up either way, whether they opt in or opt out, in my opinion, because I believe they are hell-bent on this. And that's why I want to have a discussion with Shari Few. She's the founder and president of the United States Parents Involved in Education Group, USPIE, and their website, uspie.org. Shari Few, welcome back.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. What a great topic of discussion, because it's so prevalent in our culture today.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, there's lamentably, this seems to be just one of many things that they're introducing into school curriculums all over the place. And groups like yours and others that are out there are at the forefront of these fights. And I tend to sometimes feel discouraged, and I feel like, oh my gosh, the left is winning, the radicals are taking over. And then I hear a victory here and there, or I see more and more parents stepping up or interacting with videos like these and others online. And I think, oh, you know what? More and more parents who could care less about politics but care a ton about their kids are now more involved. And that's exciting for me, and it gives me some encouragement. But give us an understanding of what you see going on the front lines.
Well, you're right. It is discouraging on one hand, and then encouraging to see, the parents that are waking up, getting involved, standing up for their children, their own parental rights. And, and they're doing so in the face of huge criticism. I mean, they're being called, even labeled hate groups, domestic terrorists. So these parents are bold and courageous. And I think it does cross political lines, because it's not just the white suburban moms, which is what they called us during the Common Core battles, but we're seeing Hispanic parents and Black parents and, biracial parents standing up and saying, no, you're not going to teach my children this. So, I've been in the education policy wars, if you will call it that, for about 20 years. And when I first got involved, the big focus was switching to this workforce development model of education, which ushered in Common Core, and it was all about outcome-based education, and it's really just a case of the government attempting to control the economy. So that was of grave concern. I didn't like the fact that they were trying to pigeonhole my child into a particular career field. That's something I felt should be left up to our family and our faith community, and they're just there to get a foundation in education. So then it jumped from that into these social justice warriors. They're trying to, and that spun out of Common Core. Every standard in Common Core, which every state in the nation outside of Florida has the Common Core standards. So every grade level has a standard that's related to teaching children to be active in these social justice wars. So from kindergarten on up, they've been training them to be that way. And then you've got the 1619 project that that came in from the New York Times and now is accepted as history in government schools. You know, it teaches systemic racism. There's an entire war on history. And then, of course, we know about the critical Marxist theories, and it's not just critical race theory. There's something called culturally relevant pedagogy that includes several critical Marxist theories: critical queer theory, critical feminist theory. It's anti-Christian. And then, of course, what you've mentioned, which I think is the most horrific, is the sexualization of children and this big push for this transgender lifestyle and grooming young children into this lifestyle, and quite often behind the backs of parents. And so it's a deep, dark issue that I've studied for a long time. I was involved with promoting abstinence education, you know, as far back as 20 years ago. And we studied how, you know, SICUS and other organizations like Planned Parenthood, you know, were originally founded about population control. And now we have the UN and the World Health Organization pushing curriculum all over the world. And in Europe, they've been very effective in training and promoting curriculum that is really insidious and can even be suggestive of pedophilia. So I hate to paint such a horrible picture, but that's exactly where we are in government schools. A lot of parents think, not in my school, you know, that's happening in California or somewhere else where I don't live, but not in my child's school. But I can tell you, I live in South Carolina, one of the very red states in the country, and it's happening. I've researched over 12 school districts in our state, and it's happening everywhere. So it is a sad picture, but then again, you pointed to the encouraging point that parents are stepping up and getting involved at great risk to themselves and their families and even their careers at times. And then, you know, we're starting to see some states that are looking at stepping back from the federal government and not taking their money, because a lot of the nefarious pedagogies originate from the federal government, incentivized with federal dollars.
Shari Few, you mentioned something that I find of particular interest because I feel like it's a flash in the pan and then it goes away. And you said that there's a lot of these Marxist, leftist, very radical, woke, if you will, teachings that are going on. And one of the ones you said is coming in by way of Europe is the normalization or softening of the blow of pedophilia. And I'd first heard about this a couple of summers ago. I remember, I think it was August of maybe 2020 or 2021. And there was this professor who was identified as transgender or non-binary, biological female, living their life as a male, and mentioned something about what they called a MAP, a minor attracted person. I almost fell off my chair when I heard this term, and I thought, why on earth would we call a pedophile a minor attracted person? And why do we try to normalize it and give it such a positive connotation? And, truth was that this person was doing exactly that. And since that time, I've heard some social commentators bring up the idea that the reason that we are allowing so many children to decide what they want to do with their bodies at an early age and exclude parents from any of their actual right over these children is because the real push is to make the correlation between saying, look, if a child knows that when they're 4 years old that they're trans, then obviously a child knows at 4 years old if they want to engage sexually or otherwise with somebody who's a different age, a minor attracted person, and try to introduce the idea or the normalization of pedophilia or minor attracted persons to younger children. I don't know that that's happening in the United States, but it's been mentioned to me, and I wanted to know what your thought on was that, and is any of this true?
Yes, unfortunately, it is true. And, when I talk to people about this, it sounds too unreal. I mean, who can believe such a thing?
You're right.
It does.
Who would believe
it? It does. Who would believe it? But the facts are there in black and white. The United Nations and the United Nations World Health Organization, along with the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, they have all put out reports, and it's a part of their Sustainable Development Goals, the Goals 2030. And people like Bill Gates are involved. I mean, Bill Gates is always behind the really nefarious things happening in the world. He's put a lot of money into Rutgers, and Rutgers is publishing curriculum for, I think, over 24 countries in the world. And some of the countries in Europe have adopted these curricula, and there's horrific examples of these curricula on a website called stopworldcontrol.com. So if they go to stopworldcontrol.com/children, there is this horrific evidence report, and they call it an evidence report because it's all well documented, and it lays out how these organizations, largely funded by Bill Gates, working with this Rutgers organization, are developing these curricula, and Rutgers has strong ties to the push for pedophilia for decades. They're founders, and they've been involved. They've been on boards of these organizations in places like Finland, and they've actually, in some of these countries, have, through their government, tried to promote pedophilia and created handbooks to show how to get away with pedophilia. So it's a horrific thought. Most people cringe and can't even believe it's true, like we said, but it is an absolute fact. And so this evidence report, shows that in the end, that the instructing of all public schools worldwide to sexualize children is happening. They're pushing drag queens into schools. This is happening all over the world, not just in America. They're pushing the transgender confusion in every nation, and they're even using the media to call for the acceptance of pedophilia. And they show several examples of headlines where they're softening the idea, like the pedophile is not the problem, they're just misunderstood. And even judges are calling for legalization of sex with minors. So it's deep and dark, and we have to understand that that's what it is. I mean, it's pure evil, and we have to fight it. We absolutely have to stop it in our government-funded schools.
So Dr. Alfred Kinsey and Daniel Carlton, Gadgetsek, and the rest of those crazies that believed in child sex, they may be dead, but their movement lives on. Folks, we're on with Shari Few from USPIE, and we're going to continue with her straight ahead. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're on with Shari Few. She's the founder and president of United States Parents Involved in Education, USPIE. USPI.org is their website. And Shari Few is in a documentary that I want to recommend to you because people need to know everything about this film, Truth and Lies in American Education. Listen to a clip of the trailer.
Public school is the instituted agency of socialism throughout every community.
The U.S. government has no authority to have any role in education.
We're going to lose our very republic if we don't stop this indoctrination of children in government schools.
What happened to us in China can't happen here.
Have one kind of education and then call it equity.
It's about outcomes. It's about trying to force us all to be equal.
I think we're going to have a race civil war in our hands.
We are exposing kids to pornography as early as kindergarten. Parents just don't know.
No, not anymore. Not anymore. Parents need to wake up. They don't have the interests of your child at heart.
Sounds fantastic, and that's just a few seconds of it. Shari Few, tell us about the film.
Well, we're very excited about the film. It's a 60-minute documentary that has a storyline. It's not a dry, boring, technical kind of documentary. The storyline follows my daughter-in-law, and it's a true story. And she came to work for me soon after she married my son. And in order to do so with the nonprofit I direct, I required her to do some reading. So the required reading included books like Crimes of the Educators, and she read several things that would inform her so that she would have the proper mindset to work in our organization. So the storyline shows how she went from being what she calls a poster child for liberals into understanding the truth about how she had been lied to in government schools, and she became a strong advocate to teach other young parents about how important it was for them to make a different choice for their children's education. And she learned for herself the need to homeschool her own children. So the storyline goes along with the books she read. She interviews the authors of the books, and we just cover all of the topics that I mentioned earlier, the workforce development, the sexualization of children, the critical Marxist theories, and we have experts who have written books that are well documented on all these topics. So it's a wonderful expose, but a true story, very heartfelt. And when I watch it, still I cry, brings tears to my eyes.
Shari Few, just for the sake of time, how does a parent that's listening right now, how do they watch the film?
They go to the film's website, and it's Truth and Lies Film, and that's spelled out, Truth, ANDLIES, film.us. So they can stream it there, they can rent it, or they can purchase a DVD. And I'd like to add, Rich,
well, before you add anything, we're going to take a quick pause and come back with your final thoughts and everything that you want to add. Folks, we're on with Shari Few, coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And I just want to remind you that we've got Open Phone America coming up in just a few short minutes. So make sure you're getting your calls in for that. If you're a first-time caller, you get to the front of the line. If you disagree with me, you get even further ahead online. We'll get to you right away if you disagree with anything you've heard. And, of course, we're on with Shari Few, founder and president of the United States Parents Involved in Education Group, USPIE, their website, uspie.org. Shari Few, how do you see things unfolding in the future? Do we continue with this hypersexualization of children in American classrooms? Does the federal government continue to wield their heavy hand? Yes, no, maybe so? What say you?
Well, I'm glad that you're giving me an opportunity to talk about the future and solutions, because we painted a bleak picture. But our organization is focused on getting the federal government out. And so our goal is to end the U.S. Department of Education and end all federal education mandates. And while that's a tall order, especially with the leadership we have in D.C. right now, we recently published a blueprint to show states how they can wean themselves off the federal dole. So
where do people find
website,
that blueprint?
Yes, at USPIE, that's uspie.org. I hope that they'll go and check it out. It's a new publication. And I just have to say that every person...
Well, thank you, Shari Few. I appreciate it. And you are wonderful. Welcome here anytime. Folks, I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of the program. Our phone number, if you want to join us on Open Phone America, where you get to weigh in, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And again, the big news of the evening, is that Steve Scalise, excuse me, sometimes I know how to speak, who was nominated yesterday to be the candidate for Speaker of the House, Speaker of the House designee, has withdrawn his name from consideration in that race after yet another meeting, fourth or fifth day of meetings with the rest of the Republican conference. Yesterday, we had an update from Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne, who was expressing her frustrations over this process, saying, you know, everybody was in agreement, and then we moved on, and then all of a sudden now there were some holdouts for many different reasons, some saying they were going to continue to support McCarthy, others saying they were not going to support Scalise, and others saying they wanted to support Jim Jordan, irrespective of the fact that he was out and was supporting Scalise. So as that continues to take shape, we'll bring you updates on that. But we have a clip from Representative Scalise, who made some comments today at around 8 p.m. this evening. I want you to listen to Congressman Steve Scalise.
I just shared with my colleagues that I'm withdrawing my name as a candidate for the Speaker designee. If you look at over the last few weeks, if you look at where our conference is, there's still work to be done. Our conference still has to come together and is not there. There are still some people that have their own agendas, and I was very clear. We have to have everybody put their agendas on the side and focus on what this country needs. This country is counting on us to come back together. This House of Representatives needs a speaker, and we need to open up the House again. But clearly, not everybody is there.
That's Steve Scalise on dropping out of the race because he feels too many people are involved in too many self-serving interests. And I don't know if this is going to put the ball back into Jim Jordan's court, but I suspect that it likely will. And earlier I shared a story in the first hour, and I'll repeat it briefly, but I'm having some work done in my bathroom. And my good buddy who's doing the work for me, he mentioned to me, he says, you know, I know you like Trump, but he says everything Trump touches doesn't turn to gold. It goes the other way. And he says, you know, as soon as he came out and said that he was endorsing Jim Jordan, boom, everybody went with Scalise. And he said, you know, I don't know when you're going to learn your lesson. I said, I wouldn't count anybody out yet. Scalise seems to be the one that's secured the most votes so far, but this could go on as we saw with McCarthy, and things can change. And I think now people are even more, I'm going to use the word volatile, in their temperament with respect to what they're going to put up with and what they're not. So while I would love for us to have a speaker, and I'd love for it to be Jim Jordan, and I'd love for it to be last week, this is part of the process. And, of course, I'm not thrilled about the timing, and I hate that it gives the Democrats and the media fodder to say, oh, the Republicans are in chaos. It's a shambles. They can't figure things out. The only thing they're good at is infighting. They can't seem to get onto the same page amongst themselves. How can they do any governing? And I know that there are people in the middle that are going to hear that and say, you know what, that kind of makes sense. You're right. I'm probably just going to stick with the Democrats, as bad as they are. As my mother would say, malo que sean. At least we know these people, right? As bad as they are, we know who they are. It kind of reminds me of the old refrain, better the devil that you know than the devil that you don't. I think in this case, everybody knows everybody. People know the Republicans. They know the Democrats. And if there's one thing I think we can take away that's positive from this, is that is the Republican Party, right? It's always been a big tent party. There's always been conservatives. There's always been moderates and others. And they get along. And it doesn't mean they're always going to agree. I think what I like most is that there is debate, that there is a challenge. There is a conversation. Not everybody's on the same page all the time. And I think that's a good thing. I really do, especially in government. I think the timing of it is unfortunate. And it seems to be whenever we do this, it's because of the unfortunate timing, because that's when they're able to negotiate the most, when there's pressure. And that was something that our guest last week, Congressman Bob Good, brought up. And he said, you need pressure. When you have pressure facing a government shutdown or any other kind of pressure where some action has to be taken, that's when you're able to have the most leverage and, you know, negotiate the best deals. So we're going to see how this thing plays out. I suspect that Jordan will prevail. That's my thinking on this, and we'll keep you up to speed on that as we go forward. Of course, we're going to get to your calls momentarily, 833-4-VALDEZ. We also had some discussion earlier tonight on the continuing murderous war by Hamas versus Israel. And there was some updates on that. We'll get to those again, plus your thoughts on that, plus a bunch of other stories that I want to get to. But I want to get to your calls. I know there's a few people that are calling in right now. And let's go to Chris, Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA. Chris, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hello, Rich. Rich, just want to bring out the hypocrisy, it seems, when we speak about the atrocities that go on, especially with the children in Israel.
All right, Chris, speak right into the phone. It's very difficult. You sound fuzzy, and try to boost your volume a little bit so everybody can hear you. You said you want to talk about the hypocrisy of what and by whom?
Well, the way you speak about the...
you want to talk about my hypocrisy. About what?
No, not yours. I mean, it's in general, but that you're surprised about the atrocities that occur when every day here in the United States, we murder around 4,400 babies, in the womb that are torn apart. And yet we don't say...
And you're talking about abortion.
But we'll speak. Yes.
Yeah.
And,
no, listen, I totally get that. I definitely don't condone that. But I will say, I think there is a grand difference between people engaging in abortion and whatever, following the law of the land, kind of like what Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And while I don't appreciate that, the Supreme Court, said it was okay, and now they say it's not okay, and that's fantastic. I think that's a great victory for the pro-life movement. But I think that's very different than people because they don't like somebody or they're arguing over real estate or over their right to exist in general, and say, we're going to burn a baby alive, we're going to behead a baby. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I think it's a stark difference that they're using rockets and they're going in there, they're grabbing women on the street and raping them. But you're right. A life is a life. God created that life, and we have no right to end that life. And I'm with you on that. But I am genuinely shocked at the gore. And you go through social media and you see some of these videos and you see some of this footage that's out there of these charred infants, and it's stomach turning, Chris.
Have you seen the videos of where they rip apart a child in the womb?
You're right. And you know what? I actually seen not a video, but I've seen photos of a late-term abortion, which I learned from an activist that showed me these videos, how they do it. And between the vacuuming and forceps, and they forcibly remove this child, and they get to like their the back of their neck, like where the spine meets the brainstem, and they put scissors in there, and then they open the scissors to sever this. I mean, you're right. It's an absolutely gruesome procedure, but it's still, to me, just not the same as burning a 6-month-old baby. But I agree with you. Just as horrific, and a life is a life, and I think you bring up a good point.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Chris. I appreciate your call. Big shout out to WGKA in Atlanta, Georgia. And yeah, I definitely, I don't think that it's okay to kill babies in any regard. But it is shocking when you see the videos that I've seen, and people send me stuff because they're hoping I'll talk about it on the air or whatever. And I got to tell you, I don't do well with that stuff. Very, very, very gruesome stuff. And perhaps we maybe need to see more of the other gruesome stuff that he was talking about to remember how gruesome of a process that is as well. I want to continue with the rest of your calls straight ahead. We're talking about everything you want to talk about, whether it's sex changes, the transgender movement, minor attracted persons that we talked about with Shari Few, and every other topic we talked about, including the speaker's race and everything on your mind. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And the slaughter continues. Netanyahu today took a very strong stance on his position on what he believes is happening. Well, not what he believes, what is going to happen in Israel, in particular in Gaza. Listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu at a press conference today with Secretary Tony Blinken.
Hamas has shown itself to be an enemy of civilization. The massacring of young people in an outdoor music festival, the butchering of entire families, the murder of parents in front of their children and the murder of children in front of their parents, the burning of people alive, the beheadings, the kidnappings of a young boy, not only kidnapped, molested, hurt, attacked, and the sickening display of celebrating these horrors, the celebration and glorification of evil.
The celebration and glorification of evil. I got to tell you, this is gruesome stuff. I'm not really an old man. I'm only 45, but I can tell you in whatever life I've lived, I haven't seen that. Again, our caller, I think his name was Mark from Georgia, brought up a great point about the brutality of abortion, and kudos to him for doing that, because it was a really good point of reference and juxtaposition. And I just personally have never seen a war that was fought like this, and it is just bizarre. Honestly, perhaps I sound naive, but I'm so disgusted by this. And I want to get your reactions. Let's go to Derek in Jamestown, New York, WJTN. Derek, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hey, what's up, America? How you doing, Mike?
What's up, Derek? How are you?
Hey, man, I'm good, man. Until it's scary, you dig? But the atrocity against babies and children has been going on for hundreds of years. Remember in Nam, they, took the children and strapped bombs to them and sent them over. And a little kid and to American soldiers and blew them up. And so Israel and Palestine are family. Ishmael came out of Palestine. Isaac, that's Israel, which is Jacob. Yeah, so Ishmael is the firstborn of Abraham, and Isaac was born out of, what can I say, there was jealousy between their parents, and Sarah was barren. She couldn't produce no children.
Until she did.
Yeah, she did, but Ishmael, she didn't produce Ishmael, and it was Hagar that produced Ishmael. And so, once again, give God things to God, and Caesar's things to Caesar. People always says Caesar's things to Caesar, and they leave it right there. But the rest of that statement is Caesar's things to Caesar and God's things to God. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the point is these images go out all around the world, and you are a blessing to the media,
Thank you,
Rich, because you're bringing a fresh element, no bias, no hate, and you don't really take sides. You're on a principle of what is right.
Yeah, and I would just add the caveat. I am biased here. I am biased for children. I'm a dad. I've had two little girls. They're a little bigger now, but I'm incredibly biased towards children. I've always felt like people who do anything against kids who are, I don't know if you're a parent or not, but becoming a dad was life-changing for me. You see life through the prism of whatever, that's a guy, I'll fight that guy, whatever. But when you have kids, you change, and you're like, I can't do that. I have to protect these little people that are so innocent and cute and nice. And to think that people are doing bad things, horrific things to little kids is really unconscionable, Derek.
And that's the poison, because when these images go around all around the world, and today is so prolific war in the industrial complex with that war machine, Lieberman brothers, they the ones that had the cotton when the slavery was in America, and they reaped all that money off of cotton. Lieberman, I guess he was a salesman or something, and they got rich and boom, financed the war. They financed that Japan and financed the Civil War. And the crazy thing about it, with the Civil War, here it is, brothers fighting each other, and here comes Lieberman brothers, and they backed both sides of the Civil War.
You're right in so much as I can tell you that the war machine is real. The war machine is alive and well. The military-industrial complex is a thing. I think Eisenhower gave us an amazing admonition in his farewell address. And it's not something that I support, but it's something that I recognize as real. It's just as recognizing walking through a certain neighborhood at a certain time in New York City. You don't have to support crime to know that it's there, and it'll find you if you're there at 3 a.m. in the wrong part of town. And I think that's exactly what the military-industrial complex is. You've got people that don't care who lives, who dies, as long as they get to build the bombs, the weapons, the planes, the tanks, you name it. And they stay in business because they have big contracts with governments that are seemingly able to tax their people ad infinitum, so that they can continue this military-industrial complex. And it's oftentimes why I give so much credit to Donald Trump, because he was able to satisfy the war machine by buying, increasing the military budget by $700 billion and restoring the military to its strength or level of strength that it needed to be, or at least getting close to it, and upgrading equipment and whatnot. But using the Reagan mantra of peace through strength, and walking quietly while holding a big stick, knowing that we have this, and let's pray to God we don't have to use it. And I think that is the way to go. While there are others, like you're suggesting, that not only want to build the bombs and planes and tanks, but they want to use them so they can sell even more of them. And of course, that's something I take exception to. We should only go to war unless we have to. And shame on anybody who's starting wars just to make some money. Derek, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Big shout out to Jamestown, New York, WJTN. Folks, the rest of your calls and more coming up straight ahead. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. It's America at Night. I'm Rich Valdez. Stay right here.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, big shout out to the great one, Mark Levin. Actually, this morning I got a text from Mark Levin with some of his thoughts that he also put on Twitter a little bit later in the day. And it was regarding Egypt and how Egypt is keeping their borders closed, preventing Palestinians from entering Egypt because they're trying to get out of there, because 6,000 bombs have been dropped on Gaza, and the Israeli Defense Forces are preparing for, I don't know, I'm going to use the word, to flatten Gaza or to destroy it, to incinerate it. And scary proposition. There's also some propaganda out there that the Egyptians knew about this ahead of time and had warned the Israelis, but didn't warn the United States. I think that sounds fake and phony and a fraud to me. The Egyptians, I don't know them. I don't know them well, but I can say I won't trust them as far as I can throw them. I want you to listen to Secretary Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense, at a press conference earlier today.
In terms of early warning or our indications and warning that we may have had to that this was going to occur. Of course, Will, if we had those indications, we would share them with Israel. But to my knowledge, we did not see that.
So that's Secretary Austin, and again, I can't imagine. I mean, I guess I could. I could imagine why the U.S. would get this information, in particular this administration specifically, and not say anything because they're on the record, right? Joe Biden has not been very friendly towards Israel. He hasn't been friendly towards Netanyahu. He's supported those that oppose Netanyahu back when he was vice president and even now as president. So it would make sense to me how they would try to undercut them that way. But the fact that the neighboring countries are, not waving flags around and banners saying, welcome, come one, come all, come into our country, where, it's telling. It's telling of why. Why would they do that? Are they afraid of Israel's response, that Israel might say, Egypt, you're going to let the Palestinians get out of Gaza and into Egypt? Well, then we're going to be mad at you. I don't think that's the case. They're doing this because they realize that this is a problem. And they're the ones that are shutting their borders, something we should do in the United States, quite frankly. Egypt has its own problems. And one of the problems that they're facing now, not really them, but some of their accused foreign agents, one of which is the wife of Senator Bob Menendez. She's being accused of being a foreign agent for Egypt. Photos show her meeting with Egyptian officials. And I got to say, I don't know if that's real or not. It seems to me that they're using the fact that Gold Bar Bob got caught with his pants down because I think they're the ones that blew the whistle on him. And by them, I mean the deep state, his fellow Democrats that disagree with his position against Iran. And all I could say is the reason I say that is because back years ago when, and Menendez has been solid on this. I don't like him personally. I don't really know him like that. I've met him once or twice. I can't say he was a nice enough guy. He really wasn't. He gave me the sense that he didn't like me. So I take that for what it's worth. But what I can say is that he has always been on the right side of the issue when it comes to supporting Iran. Now, President Barack Obama was very, very supportive of Iran. Very. And again, I could never figure that out. I can't imagine how you can be the president of the United States, right? The CEO of the federal government. How is it that you could be cordial or even deal with a country that opens their sessions of parliament with chants of death to America, death to Israel, calling us the big Satan and the little Satan? Let me tell you, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine a job where, I have to get along with others and then they're like, death to Rich Valdez. Oh, yes, thank you. How do you have that conversation? I don't think you do. And listen, I take all sorts of criticism online and on the radio, but that's very different than people calling to annihilate your existence. And not just you as a person, but, you as an entire people group, an entire nation. So I don't see how that happens. But Senator Bob Menendez's wife has been accused of being a foreign agent. And it's just fascinating to me. But my point was, I believe that when we first saw Menendez get indictment, and I'm not saying he didn't do the things he did, he very well may have done what he's alleged to have done. I feel that they only came at him when there was a Democrat in office and always around a time when they were negotiating something. So last time it was the JCPOA, the infamous Iran deal, where Obama sent pallets of cash on an airplane. And this time it is the current situation. $6 billion in sanctions being returned that seems to have blown up in the face of the Biden administration. And again, that's a tough one for them to dig themselves out of. It doesn't matter, how skilled of a politician you are or aren't. If I'm running against Biden, no matter who I am, I'm just going to be like, that guy who wants to be your president, that guy literally sent $6 billion back to Iran. And they went around and turned that flipped that money over to Hamas and just waged one of the most gruesome wars I've seen in my lifetime. And I don't think even Biden wants those odds, right? He doesn't want to have to deal with that. I wouldn't want to deal with that either. So to that, I say, I think they're coming after Menendez a little bit harder because he's always been against Iran, realizing that these people are despots, and it's not a good look. So, again, doesn't mean he didn't do what he did. It just means they decided not to turn a blind eye and not give him the Hunter Biden treatment, but give him the gold bar Bob treatment so that he could, be slowed down and not be as vocal in his criticism of Iran. And that's the part I just never understood, why Biden, Obama, whomever it is that's out there really supports Iran the way they do. I don't see the benefit in it at all. Anyway, I want to get to your calls. I know you guys have a lot to talk about tonight. Let's go to Todd, Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA. Todd, go right ahead.
Hey, good evening, Rich. Great show. Really enjoyed your guest, and I think Obama supports. I think he's supporting Iran because they hate America as much as he does. And you're right. You're right to be skeptical about Egypt. That's a big Muslim Brotherhood nest of vipers. And let's not forget that the Muslim Brotherhood met with Obama in the White House 36 times while he was in office.
Right, and I just want to be clear for anybody who's listening who doesn't know the Muslim Brotherhood. They're not a religious organization, right? This is a terrorist organization, the Muslim Brotherhood. They're like Hamas. They're like Hezbollah. These are not, guys that are out there preaching about Islam. This is a legitimate terrorist group and tries to claim legitimacy by taking over governments where they can have influence. And this is exactly what we see in Palestine with the Hamas folks, taking over the Palestinian Authority and, in effect, really running the show.
Yes, and Morsi was thrown out of office, and he was actually a Muslim Brotherhood flunky. And this goes back to the Arab Spring, which goes back to the Obama administration. And and you mentioned the $150 billion pallets of cash that was airdropped on Iran. That's what's funded the drones and funded the missiles and everything. So, Biden, how can he be trusted? I think the $6 billion should be unfrozen and it should be sent directly to Israel. So let's see if he really supports Iran. Let's see if he'll do that. But and the atrocities against these kids, beheading them, burning them, this goes back to the Battle of the Trench in 627 A.D. when the Prophet Muhammad, the mass murderer who founded the religion of peace, he did the exact same things to the Jewish tribe in Arabia, the Quraysh. And so, it's repeating the same brutality that's gone on for the last 14 centuries. Meanwhile, Christians are being massacred in Nigeria by Boko Haram, another Muslim offshoot. So it's really, really tragic what's going on. But it's all been prophesized too. But, I was calling about the lady with the education. I really think abolishing the Department of Miseducation would be a great platform for President Trump. And it's really revolting what they're doing to these kids with this gender brainwashing. Your brain doesn't even just develop in your 20s, and they're getting them sex hormones.
No, you're right. The brain develops at 23, I think, is the latest number, where you've reached full maturity on brain development. And it's and you mentioned a few things. I want to unpack them as best I can. But you're right. It should never happen. It should not happen. We should do something. At least 18. If you're old enough to go to war, buy a gun, and do certain things at 18, then let's do that. It's interesting. You can't even rent a car at 18, though. You have to be 25 in most states to rent a car. You can drive one, you just can't rent one. And I just think, if you can't do those things, why are we letting little kids do all these other things? Like, drag queen story hour. Mom, take me to the drag queen story hour. The things that are going on are absolutely crazy. The other thing that you mentioned was, again, I'm not an expert on the history of Islam versus Islamists within the faith that have, prostituted the message of their prophet to bring about harm and violence to people. I know there's a lot of people out there that think it's one and the same. I'm not one of those people. I think I've known plenty of Muslims who are absolutely fine people, and I would never equate what Hamas is doing to all Muslims. I think that would be unfair. But I would definitely equate what Hamas is doing to scumbag terrorists, because that I think they are. Todd, thank you for your call. Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA in the building. We're going to continue with your calls and more straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Our responsibility is to the stability and the security of the region. That means being able to support, yes, Israel in its defensive capacities, right, in its ability in that context. But it also means that the United States has a responsibility to ensure accountability to human rights, to prevent the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and to ensure that horrors do not happen in the names of victims who do not want their tragedy used to justify further violence and injustice.
That, of course, is my least favorite Congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, AOC, all-out crazy Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And she says that the United States has a responsibility to prevent the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. I would agree. I think we have a responsibility to prevent ethnic cleansing wherever it happens. This is why we're constantly, at least in theory and in rhetoric, telling China that they're guilty of human rights abuses for doing this with the Uyghur Muslims and any other situation where we've seen this type of thing. The problem, and I'm not saying it is or isn't happening, because I've never been to Palestine, never been to Gaza, I've never been to Israel. But I do realize that there is conflict there. I do not think for a second that the Israelis are trying to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. I think that there's been conflict and it's gotten ugly and it's been lethal. I think right now that rhetoric may start to stick in the media with the response that they're going to get as a result of this murderous war that they've waged on Israel. And I don't care if you're using, the fan that's in your kitchen window with an air balloon and a couple of bottle rockets from last 4th of July as the way you're going to launch your attack. I think you're still going to be squashed by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. And shame on you for starting a fight you couldn't finish. This is ultimately going to cost a lot of people their lives. But if you're letting the bad guys hang out, and again, I realize they're the bad guys, and they have weapons, and they have the control, and they have the underground tunnels, and they have places they can hide where there's a lot of civilians. But ultimately, you have just awakened the beast by assassinating children, by burning them alive. I mean, their parents, and when you see these charred images, you could see the faces on these people, that they died in pain. They died in fear. They died in agony. This isn't something I think any government would take laying down. Anyway, let me see. Let's quickly go to a call. We have a minute to go. Joe, Salem, Arkansas, KSAR. Go right ahead.
Yeah, Rich. I was glad to hear that fellow talk about Hagar and her son with Abraham, Ishmael, and then Sarah's son, Isaac. Well, this whole thing started back there.
Yes.
When Ishmael and Hagar was put out of the land because Sarah got jealous again after she became fertile and had Isaac. Well, the blessings went from Abraham being willing to sacrifice his son. He was blessed from there on down, and as Ishmael and those people watched. There's a prophecy. I mean, they've seen how Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and then Ephraim and Manasseh. And you can trace Manasseh back to the United Kingdom and the European West and America, right in the name, the New Jerusalem it talks about. Right in the middle is USA and the New Jerusalem. Well, that's the company of nations. All these 50 states are a company of nations. And the UK is the great nation. That was Manasseh, we're Ephraim. Anyway, as they watch this, and there are Middle East people that, and I've talked to a few, that know that this jealousy, the prophecy was Ishmael's seed would be a wild man to everyone, including their own. And they massacre their own people even. And so
again, I won't paint all Muslims with a broad brush, but I will say I think the covenant is accurate. The covenant was from Abraham to Isaac and Jacob and their seed, and I think it's a misunderstanding of theological history to presume it any other way. So I think you're right on that point, Joe. Thank you for your call. I got to take a quick pause here. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It is the speed round, and we've got a bunch of callers. We've got Robert in South Carolina. Says straight people can still be attracted to the same sex. That sounds like an interesting topic. Jim in Harvard, Illinois, Joliet Township. We're going to get to you in a moment. Rob in Mitchell, South Dakota, KORN. Great station, Rob. If we don't have time, promise me you'll call back in tomorrow. I definitely want to chat with you. Linda in Albany, New York, WGDJ. She says educational variety is fantastic. Let's go to Jim. He was next in line. Harvard, Illinois, WGN. Jim, go quickly.
Okay, Joliet, hello, Rich. Joliet Township Supervisor Angel Contreras reportedly filed without mayor's knowledge nor the board's knowledge of an immigrant asylum grant, which was awarded $8.6 million. How is that valid when there was no vote?
I don't know how they appropriate money in Joliet Township, but I would suppose that whether it's a committee, what they call commissioners, or a city council, there should be a vote on that. That's how that typically works. I don't know what his discretion is and how much he can spend, but it sounds fishy, and we're going to look into that and see what we can find out about it, because that seems to be what happens all over the place, and that's why money gets misspent all the time. Big shout out to everybody listening. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, America. Take care, good night, and God bless. I am Rich Valdez.